Opinion.
Think more basic. Practice. There you go. Number one. Most important thing in learning anything, no matter what you're talking about. Writing is no different. Practice, 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 practice. If you want to be a good writer, write more. I can stand up here. Does anyone know how to juggle? Just by chance? You know how? I learned years ago, and I can stand up here and tell you exactly how to juggle, but that doesn't mean you can go outside and start going at it. So it's just like anything else. I can tell you tips on how to write, but until you practice, until you do it over and over again and say, okay, this is what I did well last time, this is what I need to work on this time, it's just a process. You can go back and look at what you wrote in second grade and see that it's a little different than what you wrote now. See that for yourself. So, any ideas on number two? What's the second most important thing? Grammar is also good. I would put that at number three. I think grammar, spelling, punctuation, all those basic tools, incredibly important. Any idea why?
So people can understand it clearly.
Yes, so people can understand it clearly, so people take you seriously. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you misspell your idea, then people will say, okay, he can't even spell what he's talking about, why should I listen to the rest of what he's saying? And so grammar, spelling, punctuation, all of those things, the basic tools of writing, of being a good writer, incredibly important, if for nothing else, just so you don't distract your reader. You don't distract your reader by having them wonder how smart you really are. You prove it to them. And just do the basics right, and the rest will come. Number two, I'll just give it to you, is read. Kind of like practicing. Practice all the writing you want, but also read other people's writing, read all sorts of things, read novels, read comic books, read graphic novels, read speeches. They all have their own styles, they all have their own pluses and negatives, and if you can get used to all the different styles, then you can use all the different styles in your own writing. You can say, okay, I read something in a sermon 6 months ago that would really come in handy right here, or I read this transcript of a TV show that would be useful. Read all you can just so you're familiar with how other people write, and it's really a big part of finding your own voice, of saying, okay, I can write like this person if I really want to, but do I really want to? Or should I write like this person or somewhere in the middle? How do I want to interpret what I'm talking about? And the more options you have, the better you'll be able to put your own personal voice into it, rather than feeling like you only know how to write this one thing. You only know how to write causal essays. You only know how to write, summary, thesis, summary, point, conclusion. That's all I know how to write, so that's what I'm going to write every single time. But there's all sorts of different ways to write. Learn them all, and it'll come in handy. I promise you. I can remember from when I was in high school learning all sorts of things and thinking, okay, I'm never going to need to know how to find the hypotenuse of something. And I promise you, I've never needed to know how to find the hypotenuse of something. But that's mostly because I'm not in math. And I think writing, I'm a little biased, I admit, because it's my job, but much more general, much more of a life skill that'll come in handy no matter what you're doing. If you want to be a teacher, if you want to be a fireman, if you want to be a stunt double for somebody, writing is going to come in handy for writing your resume, for writing your email suggesting to your boss that this is how we should do something because your idea sucks. You know how to put it that way to get results instead of it's just going to come in handy all sorts of places. So I would encourage you, whether you think you want to go into a profession that is mostly writing all the time, or whether you don't really care right now about writing at all, it's a skill that'll come in handy in anywhere that any job that you head toward, and it's something, just communication in general is going to be incredibly important. So, writing. Top 3 everything to write. So most of my job is more persuasive writing specifically, trying to convince people of something. Anybody have ideas on what you need to do to become a good persuasive writer? What's different than regular writing? Yes?
You want to make people think like you do?
Yes.
And make them go more towards your opinion?
And how do you do that?
By telling them that the other way is wrong.
Okay.
You have evidence in your way.
Hmm?
You have to have evidence in the way you think.
Yes, and it's a good step because you can tell people you're wrong all day long, but it helps to have evidence to say, here's why you're wrong and here's why I'm right. So evidence is a good step. Yes.
Comes with like their symptoms.
Yes. And can you expand on that? What do you mean by?
Persuasive techniques like
Mm-hmm.
how it affects things.
Yes. Emotional appeals are always good. They will say, here's why you should care about this, basically, because this is important to you, and if it can make you feel something, it must be more important than something that you just don't care about at all. And a really important way of doing that is to make things personal to people, instead of saying that I don't know, the wall should be beige or whatever color that is. Instead of just saying everybody agrees the wall should be beige, you make it personal. You say studies have shown that beige walls improve grades by 10%. So if we paint this color beige, you'll be more likely to get an A. Something like that. Of course, make it true, but if you can make it personal, if you can say this is how it will affect you, then you're going to be much more likely to convince somebody. If you can bring it home to them and say, this is why you should care about this topic, rather than just saying, here's the topic, and here's what I think about it. Because most of the time, people won't care unless it affects them. I think we touched on this a little bit with some of these other things, but the other thing to do is really just incredibly important to make your writing interesting, because you can have lots of evidence, you can have a great argument, but if you're not really an interesting writer, people will just read the first 2 sentences and say, oh, whatever, and turn the page. So be interesting, and you can do that by being personal, you can do that by using humor, you can do that by being unexpected, you can use illustrations and examples that people may not have thought of. I'm thinking, put things in unusual perspectives, for example. I know some of you were probably writing on CCU tuition recently, or college tuition in general, with your causal essays. And I happened to write an editorial on that a couple of years ago, and I said something like, if the price of Big Macs rose at the same rate as college tuition over the past 25 years, then we'd be paying about $15